The sky turned black on a Tuesday morning. People all over Earth looked up and saw something that made their hearts stop. Ships, thousands of them. They covered the sun like a blanket of metal and fire. Children pointed at the sky. Parents pulled them inside and locked their doors, but doors meant nothing against what was coming. They had arrived. They were an old species, very old, when humans were still living in caves and hunting with stone tools, though were already building cities among the stars. Their empire stretched across 3 arms of the galaxy. They had conquered 12 species before humanity even learned to make fire. And now they were angry. 6 months ago, human colonists had landed on a small moon called 4. It was a beautiful place with silver grass and 2 small suns. The colonists built homes there. They planted gardens. They had no idea that this moon was sacred to it was the burial place of their first emperor, dead for 10,000 years. To they, what humanity had done was worse than war. It was an insult to their ancestors. Their law was clear about such things. The punishment was extinction, complete and total, no survivors, no mercy. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Silence. She was tall, even for her skin was pale blue and her eyes were like pools of liquid silver. She had commanded fleets for 200 years. She had destroyed civilizations that threatened her people. She had never lost a battle. Through the great window of her ship she watched the blue planet below, Earth. Such a small world, such a young species. They had only been traveling between stars for 150 years. They had no weapons that could scratch her ships. This would not even be a battle. It would be an execution. Admiral, said her second-in-command, a young officer named. All ships are in position. We await your order. Nodded slowly. 1 word from her and 7 billion humans would die. Their cities would burn. Their oceans would boil. In 1 hour, Earth would be nothing but ash and memory. She opened her mouth to give the order. Admiral, another officer spoke suddenly. A ship is approaching from the planet's surface. Turned, what kind of ship? A weapon. No, Admiral, it appears to be a shuttle, unarmed. It is broadcasting a message on all channels. They are asking permission to approach. The bridge fell silent. Every officer looked at each other with confusion. They had expected panic. They had expected desperate attacks. They had not expected this. One shuttle asked, just one. Yes, Admiral, it carries a single life sign, human. Stared at the small dot of light moving toward her fleet. In 200 years of war, she had never seen anything like this. A single unarmed ship flying toward certain death. It was either very brave or very stupid. Let it approach, she said. The shuttle landed in the docking bay of the Eternal Silence. Armed guards surrounded it, their weapons ready. The door of the shuttle opened and a young human stepped out. His name was, he was 29 years old. He had been a diplomat for only 3 years. When the United Earth Council asked for a volunteer to carry a message to he had raised his hand. Everyone told him he would die. He knew they were probably right. But someone had to try. He walked forward with his hands raised. He carried nothing but a small computer tablet and a piece of paper, real paper with words written by hand. The guards searched him roughly and found no weapons. They brought him to the bridge. Had never seen a before. They were taller than he expected, more beautiful too, in a cold and frightening way. Admiral looked down at him like a giant looking at an insect. You are either brave or foolish, she said. Her voice was like ice. Why have you come? His hands were shaking. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode, but he kept his voice steady. I bring a message from the people of Earth, he said. He held up the piece of paper. May I read it? Waved her hand. Read. Unfolded the paper. The words had been written by the leader of the United Earth Council, an old woman named President, but they spoke for all of humanity. To the people, read, we did not know. When our people landed on 4, we did not know it was sacred to you. We did not know about your emperor or your ancestors. We are young among the stars. We make mistakes. This was a terrible mistake, and we are truly sorry." He paused and looked up at her. Face showed nothing. "We ask for a chance to make this right," he continued. "Tell us what we must do. We will remove our people from your sacred moon. We will pay any price you ask. We are not too proud to beg. Please, give us a chance to fix what we have broken." The bridge was completely silent. Folded the paper and waited. He expected to die now. He had said what he came to say. If his death could buy his people even one more hour, it was worth it. Admiral stared at him for a long time. In 200 years she had conquered many species. Some had fought. Some had run. Some had begged for their lives while offering nothing in return. None of them had ever said sorry. She thought of her own ancestors. She thought of the emperor buried on that small moon. What would he want? Would he want the blood of 7 billion people who had made an honest mistake? 30 cycles, she said finally. Her voice was quiet. You have 30 of your Earth days to remove every human from 4, every building, every trace. Leave nothing behind. Could not believe what he was hearing. And then you live, but never return to that moon. If you do, there will be no second chance. Fell to his knees, tears ran down his face. Thank you, thank you. Admiral turned away. Go, before I change my mind. 20 minutes later, shuttle left the flagship. 1 hour after that, the great fleet began to move. By sunset, the sky over Earth was clear again. The news spread across the planet like wildfire. People danced in the streets. They hugged strangers. They cried with joy and relief. But some people did not celebrate. They sat quietly and thought about what had happened. They thought about the mercy they had been given, and they made a promise. Humanity would remember this day. Humanity would remember Admiral and her choice. And one day, when the chance came, they would prove that her mercy was not wasted. They just did not know when that day would come. 50 years passed since the day of mercy. Children who were born on that terrible Tuesday were now adults with children of their own. The story of Admiral and the young diplomat had become legend. Parents told it to their children at bedtime. Teachers taught it in schools. Every year on that Tuesday, people all over Earth held a moment of silence to remember how close they had come to the end. Himself was now an old man. He lived in a small house near the sea in Korea. Sometimes reporters came to ask him about that day. He always told them the same thing. I was just a messenger, he would say. The real hero was Admiral. She had every right to destroy us. She chose not to. That is something we must never forget. But while humanity remembered, the galaxy moved on. And for the Empire, things were getting very bad. It started on a small colony world near the center of their territory. People began to get sick. At first, doctors thought it was just a normal illness. But this sickness was different. It attacked the brain. Patients would slowly lose their ability to think, to move, to remember who they were. In the end, they just lay still, alive but empty, staring at nothing. They called it the withering. Within 5 years, the withering spread to every world. Billions were infected. Their hospitals overflowed. Their scientists worked day and night to find a cure, but nothing worked. There were masters of war and technology, but this enemy was too small to see and too strong to defeat. The galaxy watched. Many species felt no sadness. They had been conquerors for thousands of years. They had crushed civilizations beneath their boots. Now they were dying, and their old enemies smiled in the dark. On Earth, a young scientist named was watching too. She was 35 years old, the daughter of a doctor and a teacher. She led a research team at the Seoul Institute for Xenobiology, studying alien diseases. When news of the withering reached Earth, she began to study it from afar, reading every report she could find. One night she stayed late in her laboratory. The building was empty. Rain fell against the windows. She stared at her computer screen, looking at images of sick patients. They looked so helpless, so afraid. She thought about her grandmother who had been alive on the day of mercy. Grandmother always told stories about that day, about how the sky went dark, about how everyone thought they were going to die, about how a single act of kindness saved them all. They gave us a chance, grandmother used to say. They did not have to, but they did. Made her decision that night. The next morning, she requested a meeting with the United Earth Council. It took 2 weeks to arrange. When she finally stood before the leaders of humanity, her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. "They are dying," she said. "Their doctors cannot find a cure, but we might be able to help. Human biology is very different from biology. Our immune systems work in ways theirs do not. I believe we can develop a treatment, maybe even a cure." The council members looked at each other. An old man named Minister Park spoke first. "Why should we help them? They nearly killed us all 50 years ago." "That is exactly why we should help them," replied. "Because they did not kill us. They showed us mercy. Now they are suffering and we have a chance to repay that debt." The room erupted in argument. Some agreed with, others thought she was crazy. Why risk exposing humans to an alien disease? Why spend resources on a species that had threatened their existence? The debate went on for 3 days. In the end, it was who settled it. The old diplomat, now 80 years old and walking with a cane, traveled to the council chambers. Everyone fell silent when he entered. He was a living legend. He spoke simply. 50 years ago, I stood before Admiral and begged for humanity's life. She could have said no. She could have followed her laws and killed us all, but she chose mercy. She chose to believe that we deserved a chance." He paused and looked around the room. "Now we have a chance to prove she was right. If we turn away from them in their time of need, what does that say about us? What does that make us?" The vote was held the next day. Humanity would help the 6 months later, a fleet of 47 ships left Earth. They carried 3,000 volunteers, scientists, doctors, nurses, and engineers. They brought the best medical equipment humanity had. They brought hope. The captain of this fleet was a man named. He was 48 years old, tall and strong, with gray hair at his temples. His grandfather had been a soldier on the Day of Mercy, one of the men who had stood ready to defend Earth knowing they could not win. Grew up hearing that story. Now he was about to write a new chapter. When his fleet crossed into space, they were met by warships. Even dying, they were proud and suspicious. Why would humans come here? What did they want? Opened a communication channel. His message was broadcast across the entire empire. "People of the," he said, 50 years ago, Admiral stood above our world with the power to destroy us. She chose mercy instead. That mercy saved 7 billion lives. Today, humanity has come to repay that debt. We bring our best doctors and our best scientists. We bring medicine and equipment. We bring everything we have. We ask for nothing in return except the chance to help." There was a long silence. Then a voice responded. "Human captain, why would you do this? We were your enemies." Smiled. "You were never our enemies. You were our teachers. You taught us that even the strong can show kindness. You taught us that mercy is not weakness. Now let us show you what we learned." The warships powered down their weapons. They escorted the human fleet to the nearest hospital station. Wen and his team stepped off their ships. They found thousands of sick waiting for help. And waiting with them, watching from a floating chair because she was too old to stand, was Admiral. She was over 300 years old now, her blue skin pale and thin, her silver eyes clouded with age. But she was still alive. When approached her, she looked at him for a long time. "You came," she said. Her voice was weak but clear. "We came," replied. "We never forgot what you did for us." A single tear rolled down the old Admiral's face. In 300 years, no enemy had ever made her cry. But this was not an enemy. This was something she had never expected to see. This was humanity keeping its promise. The work began immediately. Human doctors put on protective suits and entered hospitals. Human scientists set up laboratories on space stations. Human engineers built quarantine zones to keep the disease from spreading further. Every day, ships arrived from Earth carrying more supplies, more medicine, more volunteers. The watched in amazement. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had seen many species, but they had never seen anything like this. Humans worked without rest. They pushed themselves until they collapsed, and then they got up and worked some more. Doctor led the research team. She had never worked so hard in her life. Every morning she woke up at 5 and worked until midnight. She studied the withering from every angle. She tested hundreds of ideas. Most of them failed, but she did not give up. The answer is here somewhere, she told her team. We just have to find it. The months passed. Summer turned to winter. Winter turned to spring. Still, there was no cure. And then the humans started getting sick. It happened slowly at first. A scientist felt tired. A nurse had headaches. A doctor forgot where she left her tools. The early signs were easy to miss, but recognized them. She had seen the same symptoms in patients. The withering had jumped to humans. Captain called an emergency meeting. The news was terrible. 14 humans had been infected. The disease was changing, adapting to attack human brains. If they stayed, more would die. We should pull back, said one of his officers. We cannot help thee if we die too. If we leave now, we lose everything, argued. We are close to a breakthrough, I can feel it. We need more time. Looked at the faces around him. These were his people. He was responsible for their lives. Every good captain would protect his crew. Every smart leader would retreat. But remembered his grandfather's stories. He remembered standing on a ship that could not win, ready to fight anyway. We stay, he said. But from now on, everything is voluntary. Anyone who wants to go home can go. No shame, no questions, just go. Not a single person left. Among the volunteers was a young nurse named. She was only 24 years old, small and quiet, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She had joined the mission because she wanted to help. She had never expected to become famous. Worked in the children's hospital on Prime. Every day she cared for young patients. She fed them. She cleaned them. She held their hands when they were scared. The children could not understand her words, but they understood her kindness. One night a little girl named was dying. The withering had taken everything from her. She could not move. She could not speak. She could only lie there alone in the dark, waiting for the end. Sat beside her bed. She held small hand in her own, and she began to sing. It was an old Korean lullaby, the same once mother had sung to her as a child. The words meant nothing to, but the melody was soft and warm. It wrapped around the dying girl like a blanket. Sang all night. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She just held his hand and sang until the sun came up. Died at dawn, but she did not die alone, and in her final moments there was something like peace on her face. A nurse had been watching from the doorway. She had recorded everything on her personal device. She shared the recording with her friends. They shared it with others. Within days, the video of singing to a dying alien child had spread across the entire empire. For the first time, the people saw humans not as strangers, but as friends. 3 days after his death, began to feel tired. She had headaches. She forgot small things. She knew what was happening, but she did not tell anyone. She just kept working. 2 weeks later, she collapsed in the hospital corridor. They rushed her to the medical bay. Doctor ran tests and found what she feared, had the withering. The disease had progressed too far. There was nothing they could do. Spent her final weeks in a hospital bed. Friends visited her every day. Captain came and held her hand. Doctor came and apologized through tears. Don't be sorry, told her. You are going to find the cure, I know it, and when you do, remember me. She died on a quiet afternoon, surrounded by flowers that her had grown in the ship's garden. She was 24 years old. She had been on the mission for 14 months. Her last message to her parents back on Earth was simple: "I am not sorry. I would do it again." Death broke something in the human team, but it also lit a fire. They worked harder than ever. They stopped sleeping. They stopped eating proper meals. They pushed themselves beyond all limits. And finally, 18 months after the mission began, found the answer. The cure was a special protein that blocked the withering from attacking brain cells. Human immune systems produced it naturally, which was why humans took longer to get sick. Figured out how to make it in a laboratory. She tested it on patients. It worked. Within 6 months, the cure was being produced on every world. Patients who had been sick for years began to recover. Children who doctors had given up on opened their eyes and spoke their first words. They called it the protocol. Admiral was 304 years old when she heard the news. She had been sick herself, the withering slowly eating away at her ancient mind. The cure saved her life. On the day she was released from the hospital, she gave her final public address. The entire empire was watching. "I have lived for 3 centuries," she said. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have won wars that shaped the galaxy, but I have never seen anything like what humanity has done for us." Her voice shook with emotion. "I showed them mercy once because I thought they were insignificant. I was wrong. They were simply young, and in their youth they had something our ancient empire had forgotten: the ability to forgive and the courage to love." She paused and looked directly at the camera. "I am dying, not from the withering but from age. Before I go, I have one last order. When I am buried, the human flag will fly beside our own. Let this be remembered forever. Let the galaxy know what humanity did for us. Let no one ever forget." Admiral died 3 days later. At her funeral, the flags of 2 species flew side by side. And somewhere in the crowd, among thousands of and hundreds of humans, a young mother held her daughter close. The daughter had been cured by the protocol. "Remember this day," the mother whispered. "Remember the humans who saved us." The little girl nodded. She would remember. They all would. 100 years after the withering, the galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer a small, young species hiding in one corner of space. They had grown. They had learned. Most importantly, they had made friends. The bond between humans had become something rare and beautiful. They traded goods and ideas. They shared technology and art. They protected each other like brothers and sisters. Other species watched and wanted to join. The human compact became an alliance of 17 species, all bound together by a simple promise: we help each other. When one member fell, the others picked them up. When one member was attacked, the others defended them. For 100 years, the compact brought peace and prosperity to a large part of the galaxy. But not everyone was happy. The Dominion had ruled their corner of space through fear for thousands of years. They believed in one thing above all else: strength. The strong commanded, the weak obeyed. That was the natural order of the universe. The compact was a threat to everything they believed, an alliance built on kindness, cooperation instead of conquest. It was absurd. It was dangerous. It had to be destroyed. Lord, the supreme commander of the, assembled the largest fleet in his people's history. 300 warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. His target was prime. He would burn the heart of the compact and watch the rest crumble. The fleet entered space on a cold morning. Their message was broadcast to every world in the system. Dissolve your alliance with the humans. Submit to rule. Do this and you will be spared. Resist and your world will become ash. The government sent a desperate call for help. Their own fleet was strong, but not strong enough. They had maybe 120 warships. Against 300, they would be crushed. On Earth, Admiral received the call. She was 42 years old, the youngest admiral in human history. Her black hair was cut short, and her eyes were hard as stone. She had spent her whole life preparing for a moment like this. Now it had arrived. She gathered her officers on the bridge of her flagship, the Remembrance. It was named after the Day of Mercy, a reminder of where humanity's story began. "They need us," she said. "They have 300 ships, we have 80. This will not be an easy fight. It might not be a fight we can win." She paused and looked at each of them. "I am going anyway. Anyone who wants to stay behind can stay. There is no shame in it." Her first officer, a young man named, spoke up. "Admiral, you know we are not going to stay behind." Almost smiled. "I know, I had to ask anyway." Within hours, every human warship in the fleet was ready to go. 80 ships, 30,000 sailors, not enough to win, maybe enough to matter. As the fleet prepared to leave Earth, a reporter managed to send a question to the flagship. "Admiral, they are asking how many ships you will send to help them. What is your answer?" "Did not hesitate, all of them." Her words spread across the galaxy in minutes. Every species heard them. Every leader understood what they meant. Humanity was about to fight a war they could not win, and they were bringing everything they had. The Battle of Prime began at dawn. The fleet surrounded the planet like a wall of steel. Their weapons were ready. Their warriors were eager. Lord watched from his command ship, confident and cruel. Then the human fleet arrived. 80 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly between the and Prime. They formed a line, their shields glowing, their weapons armed. Lord laughed. 80 ships against 300. These humans are fools." He gave the order to attack. The battle was terrible. Ships were bigger, stronger, more heavily armed. They had been built for war. Human ships were smaller, faster, but fragile. In the first hour, 12 human ships were destroyed. But the humans did not retreat. They fought with a fury they had never seen. Every time a human ship fell, the others pressed forward harder. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to buy time. And time was exactly what they needed. While the humans held the line, the fleet regrouped. Reinforcements arrived from nearby systems. Other compact species sent their own ships. By the fourth hour, they were not facing 80 human ships anymore. They were facing 200 compact ships, with more arriving every hour. Lord was not laughing anymore. In the heat of the battle, a human cruiser called the Brave Heart was hit by a missile. The engine exploded. The ship was dead in space, spinning slowly toward the planet below. Lieutenant was the pilot. He was 29 years old. He had a mother back on Earth, a sister in medical school, a dog named waiting for him to come home. He had joined the Navy because he wanted to protect people. Now his ship was dying, and so was he. But through the smoke and fire, he saw something on his screen. A battleship had broken through the line. It was heading for Prime, weapons charging. It was about to fire on a city of 2 million people. Could not save himself, but he could still fly. He grabbed the controls and pushed everything the Brave Heart had left into the engines. The broken ship screamed forward, trailing fire and smoke. "This is Lieutenant," he broadcast on all channels. "Tell my mother I remembered what we owe." The Brave Heart hit the battleship at full speed. Both ships exploded together. The city below was saved. 2 million watched the explosion from their streets. They did not know his name. They did not know his face. But they knew what he had done for them, and they would never forget. The battle lasted 18 hours. In the end, they retreated. They had lost 140 ships. Their pride was broken. Their legend of being unbeatable was dead. Humanity lost 31 ships. 12,000 sailors gave their lives. In the days that followed, the galaxy talked about what had happened. Military experts analyzed the battle. Politicians made speeches. Reporters wrote stories. But the people did something simpler. They built a monument on the spot where the Brave Heart fell from the sky. It was a tall pillar of white stone, and on it were carved the names of every human who died defending Prime. At the top of the pillar, in letters that would last forever, they wrote 7 words. They came when we called for help. Admiral visited the monument after the war. She stood before it for a long time, reading the names. Hundreds of names, her people, her family. A child walked up to her and tugged on her sleeve. "Are you one of the humans who saved us?" the child asked. Knelt down to look at her. "I am." The child hugged her tightly. "Thank you." Hugged her back. In that moment she understood why they had come, why they had fought, why so many had died. It was never about winning or losing. It was about keeping a promise made 150 years ago. They had shown mercy to humanity once. And humanity never forgot. 200 years had passed since the day of mercy. The galaxy was a different place now. The human compact had grown into something no one had imagined. What started as gratitude between 2 species had become a family of 43 worlds. They shared everything: knowledge, culture, hope, and dreams of a better future. The Dominion still existed, but it was smaller now, weaker. Other species had seen what happened at the Battle of Prime. They had seen what the compact could do. Many chose to join the alliance. They could no longer bully their neighbors. Peace was not perfect. There were still problems, still conflicts, still hard days. But there was also something new in the galaxy. There was trust. There was friendship. There was the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. On Earth, life went on. In the old city of Seoul, there was a museum called the Hall of Memory. It was built on the spot where the United Earth Council had voted to help the 2 centuries ago. People came from all over the galaxy to visit it. The museum was full of treasures. There were artifacts from the first human spaceships. There were recordings of famous speeches. There were paintings and sculptures and songs. But 3 things drew visitors more than anything else. The first was a piece of paper behind glass. It was old and yellow, the ink faded with time. This was the letter that had carried to Admiral, the apology that started everything. Beside it was a small photo of as a young man, nervous and brave, about to change history. The second was a portrait of. The artist had captured her exactly as she was, small, gentle, with eyes full of kindness. She was holding a child's hand. The child was. The painting was called The Nurse Who Sang. The third was a wall. It was the longest wall in the museum, stretching from one end of the building to the other. On this wall were names, thousands of names. They were the humans who had given their lives in service to the compact. Soldiers, scientists, doctors, nurses, engineers, diplomats, and teachers. His name was there. So were many others. At the bottom of the wall, carved into the stone in letters that glowed with soft light, was an inscription in 2 languages, human and. They spared us once, we spared them once. Then we saved each other. That is how families are made, not through the blood we spill, but through the blood we share. Every year on the anniversary of the Day of Mercy, visitors gathered at this wall. Humans and stood side by side. They read the names. They remembered the stories. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they smiled. On the 200th anniversary, the crowd was larger than ever. Among the visitors was a historian named. He was old, older than most of his species ever lived. His blue skin was pale and thin, his silver eyes dim with age. He had spent his entire life studying humanity. Today, he was here to present his final work. The crowd fell silent as walked to the stage. Behind him, a great screen showed the cover of his book. It was called The Human Miracle, How a Young Species Changed the Galaxy. Spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. 200 years ago, humanity was nothing. A small species on a small world, barely able to travel between stars. They had no great armies. They had no ancient wisdom. By every measure the galaxy uses, they should have been forgotten. He paused and looked out at the crowd, at the humans and dozens of other species gathered together. But humanity did something that no one expected. They showed us that power is not the only thing that matters. They showed us that a single act of kindness can echo across centuries. They taught us that the true measure of a species is not what they take, but what they give. His voice grew stronger. When we were dying from the withering, they came to help us, not because they had to, not because they wanted something in return. They came because we had shown them mercy once and they remembered. He pointed to the wall of names. Look at these names. Ordinary people, teachers, nurses, soldiers, engineers. None of them were born heroes. They became heroes through their choices. They chose to help. They chose to sacrifice. They chose to love strangers they had never met. Paused again. The crowd was completely silent. I have studied many species in my long life. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched civilizations burn and others be born from the ashes, but I have never seen anything like humanity. He smiled, and for a moment he looked young again. Every species believes itself capable of greatness. The humans proved it through smallness, through individual acts of compassion that grew into an unstoppable force. They did not conquer the stars. They befriended them. They did not demand respect. They earned it. They did not seek immortality, but they found it anyway. He turned and gestured to the wall behind him. These names will live forever, and so will the name of their species, not because they were the strongest, not because they were the oldest, but because when the universe gave them a choice between revenge and mercy, between taking and giving, between fear and love, they chose love. He faced the crowd one last time. My friends, I give you the species that made us better. I give you the species that taught us hope. I give you the species that will be remembered when the stars themselves grow cold. His voice rang out across the hall. I give you humanity. The crowd erupted in cheers and tears and embraces. Humans hugged humans. Other species joined in. For a few beautiful moments, there were no borders, no differences, no old grudges. There was only gratitude and love and the belief that the universe could be kind. Outside the museum, the sun was setting over Seoul. Children played in the streets, human children and children running together, laughing together. They did not know the old stories very well. They had grown up in a galaxy where their species were friends. They did not remember the fear, the war, the dying. But their parents remembered. Their grandparents remembered. And one day, these children would tell the stories to their own children. The story of who walked alone into the darkness to beg for his people's lives. The story of who saw suffering and chose to heal it. The story of who sang lullabies to dying children. The story of who led his fleet across the stars to repay a debt of mercy. The story of who gave his life for 2 million strangers. The story of who brought everything she had when a friend called for help. These were not stories about war. They were not stories about conquest. They were stories about love, the stubborn, ridiculous, beautiful love that humans carried in their hearts. 200 years ago, they had spared humanity. In return, humanity made their name immortal. Not through monuments or books or songs. Those things would fade eventually. All things faded. But the love humanity showed, the mercy they returned, the bridges they built between stars, those things would echo forever. In the great silence of space, where civilizations rose and fell like waves on a shore, one truth would remain. Humanity remembered. Humanity gave. Humanity loved. And that made all the difference.